before the hour on this Monday morning. Thanks a lot for tuning in. This Storm Watch sponsored by Walls. Let's go right to the tropics. That's our first stop. And as we check on the tropics, we find that things are fairly quiet. No named storms out there, although Lisa may be on the doorstep, as we do have a vigorous disturbance in the tropical mid-Atlantic, and it could potentially become a named storm during the next couple of days right in here if this develops. Not even a depression officially yet. However, as you'll see as we close in on it here in just a little while, there's some strong rotation, and if the upper level winds that are shearing it a bit now lessen as the forecast indicates, then something could very well develop. One bad frame here obviously, but you can see before that happens that conditions are fairly quiet in the eastern Atlantic right now. Here's the disturbance about 850 miles east of the islands. Apologize for the bad picture again, but you can see the rotation of the colored cloud tops, and if the southwesterly shear diminishes over the next couple of days as it is forecast to do, then we could very well have a tropical depression, possibly a tropical storm within the next few days. If that happens, it would be Lisa. Caribbean quiet. Gulf of Mexico in pretty good shape this morning. The disturbance in the eastern Pacific has pretty much dissipated during the last 24 hours. Farther north, you notice the stronger and stronger mid-latitude cyclones, the autumn storms now beginning to show up in the North Pacific and over North America. And we'll check on that situation shortly. We have some very active weather in the lower 48 this morning. And over the South China Sea, we have some disturbed weather in the western Pacific, but no typhoons to tell you about at this particular time. So back to the States and on the U.S. water vapor loop this morning. Well, what we have is a vigorous early autumn low pressure center right here. On the western side of it, snow today, upwards of another foot in the Bighorn Mountains of Wyoming and 6 inches or more in the Black Hills of western South Dakota and northeastern sections of Wyoming. There's very strong wind with this low pressure system, soaking cold autumn rain and severe thunderstorms this morning. Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, plus more than 36 counties right now in Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma under flash flood warnings due to rainfalls of over a half a foot during the last couple of hours and some excessive flooding in this region. We'll get back to this area here in just a little bit. First stop, though, for those of you waking up in the Northeast, no unsettled weather. In fact, the main story is the fact that we have a little fog, and also, especially in New York and New England, the fact that it's a very cool autumn morning, and in some cases there is frost. You may have to spend a few extra minutes scraping it off your windshield this morning up in the St. Lawrence Valley, near Lake Champlain, the Adirondacks, upper Hudson Valley region. Boston, though, meantime, is 48. That's at Logan Field. If you're west of 495, it's a bit cooler. Same deal in New York City. That's LaGuardia Airport. Outside suburban areas, at least 10 degrees cooler. 56 in Philadelphia, 51 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. While it's autumn in the Northeast, it's still summer-like here in the South. 73 right now in Little Rock, 77 in New Orleans. A warm, moist flow out of the Gulf of Mexico in one respect, in one scenario, that is feeding these intense thunderstorms over Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. And notice the bit of a wedge shape that is indicative of diffluent winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere, a strong jet stream flow, a scenario that's conducive to severe weather. This is a newly issued severe thunderstorm watch box, and it's been in this region. We've had flooding rains, tornadic thunderstorms, strong winds, and hail from near Oklahoma City and Tulsa into northwestern sections of Arkansas, southwestern sections of Missouri too. Kansas City, after your soaking rains, the precipitation has finally let up while it's beginning to bear down on Chicago, Milwaukee, and it's already raining steadily in Madison, and we have a cold, windy rain with mountain snow back here in the high plains. Stay with us for much more next.
We're watching the threat of severe weather in the nation's midsection, including wind, hail, and the potential for tornadoes. Details on Weather Center after your local forecast.
This program was sponsored by Walls, leading the way outdoors.
If you work outside for a living, you should know Walls makes clothes to fit any job. We've been keeping working folks comfortable for over 50 years, with clothes for every season. Because because we know working outside isn't a picnic, unless it's lunchtime. Walls, leading the way outdoors.
Walls Quality Outerwear is available at a retailer near you.
Recently, Mitsubishi took a group of people out to a track to drive a Mercedes C280 and a BMW 328i, both priced around $35,000. Then we had them drive the Mitsubishi Galant.
And thanks for joining us for Storm Watch. I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso. We've been keeping a close eye on the heavy rains, the flooding, and the severe storms, and even the snow in the plains. While in the tropics, we're looking at an area of disturbed weather that is getting very close to tropical depression status. Let's start you off with the weather close to home. And here we see the storm, a strong October storm, just sitting and spinning over South Dakota. High winds drawing down cold air from the Canadian provinces and right down into Wyoming and Colorado. We've seen the snows in the mountains. Near whiteout conditions being reported here on I-80. Don't want to be traveling outside of Cheyenne up through the mountains today. In the Black Hills, we've already had reports of up to 10 inches of snow at Lead, and there's probably going to be several more before the storm winds down. To the east of this front, we have seen tropical moisture get lifted, and we've seen the very heavy rains move through Kansas City overnight. If you're watching the football game, you saw the deluge there. They even had to delay the game because of the torrential rains, about 5 inches of rain in Kansas City. Currently, we see the line of storms here in Missouri down into Oklahoma, trying to develop southward into North Texas, where we could have problems this afternoon. Yesterday, hail the size of golf balls, winds 60 to 80 miles per hour here, and even tornadoes producing a little bit of damage, and we did have reports of several injuries in Oklahoma overnight. Today, here's your severe threat extending from central Illinois into the heart of Texas here in this red zone. We want you to keep attuned to the Weather Channel's radars this afternoon, check on the storms, and also keep a close tab on those National Weather Service warnings that will be issued. Presently, we see the line of storms from Columbia, Missouri, down to near Abilene, Texas, the southern edge of the storms. The line of storms very weak, but it will be intensifying as it hits the warm, moist, unstable air. Closing into southeast Oklahoma here, the closer view on the radar, see some cells moving into Atoka County. They are intensifying. Severe thunderstorm warnings are being issued. So it's already happening. This line of storms isn't re-intensifying as it moves southeast into the very warm, moist, unstable air. And this is what we think will happen in northeast Texas this afternoon. So from the Dallas-Fort Worth area to the east, it could be a violent afternoon and early evening with hail, high winds, and maybe some tornadoes. Now, as we go farther north along the line here, you can see the wet weather moving into central Missouri. Flooding rains now moving into Columbia as we have flash flood warnings there. St. Louis, it's only a matter of time before showers and storms move in. Could be a rough afternoon here, and the threat for severe weather is here in St. Louis. Chicago, showers and storms have moved out for the time being. Light showers in Minneapolis, a lot to the west. This is where we see the snow in the Black Hills in the higher terrain. Flood watches for Missouri and Illinois all the way down into Texas. Last night, if you're watching the football game, as mentioned, it was a deluge, over 5 inches of rain, and over 5 inches of rain in Tulsa. We had to have water rescues in Tulsa this morning and in Kansas City last night. Now, as we check on the tropics, we look at our graph. Historically, September the 10th, the peak of the season, but notice we have a secondary peak in October, and during the first 10 days of October, we see the red dots. That's where the storms have tended to originate. So we're keeping a close eye on this area of disturbed weather in the Atlantic and this one here in the Southwest Caribbean. Both do have the potential to develop further. Right now, the showers and storms in the Southwest Caribbean not showing any organization, but we are a bit concerned because this area is forecast to drift northwest over the next couple of days, so we'll have plenty of time to watch that. Here's Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands and the Leeward Islands, and off to the east, here it is, our strong tropical wave. You can see the convection here all blowing up here in the orange. But notice, too, we do see some southwesterly winds over the system. So as we check on our visible picture, you can see the exposed low-level circulation center here. Off to the east of it, we do see the deeper convection. So until this gets closer to the center, this will not develop very much. Hurricane Center is watching this area of low pressure, see if they should upgrade it to a depression, so we'll let you know on that this afternoon. If this does develop, it should turn northwest. If it doesn't, It'll head into the islands Thursday.
Parts of the U.S. are dealing with the threat of severe weather, including hail and tornadoes, while others are already seeing snow. The complete outlook just ahead on Weather Center.
Car and Driver just voted the Subaru Forester #1 in its class. And with full-time all-wheel drive and 30% more horsepower than the Honda CR-V, the Forester isn't just easy to own, it's tough to beat.
Test drive the beauty of all-wheel drive at a Subaru dealer near you.
Have you ever bought a new computer, then had a question about it, and then you asked your spouse and your kid, and it was 7 o'clock, and the computer store was closed, and the guy next door who knows everything about computers was on vacation? Why not get help 24 hours a day? Go to Dell. We've won PC Magazine's award for desktop reliability and service 3 years in a row. Right now, you can get a Dell Dimension computer powered by an Intel Pentium 2 processor at 350 megahertz. You'll get a 13.6 gig hard drive with enough storage to use neat stuff like digital cameras. Plus, you'll get a 17-inch monitor, a 40x variable CD-ROM for fast access, Altec Lansing speakers with subwoofer, and it comes preloaded with Microsoft Windows 9.
We continue to follow very heavy rain across the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Also very large hail. Reports in Weatherford, Texas, west of Fort Worth of 1-inch hail in the past hour. Also doings in the tropical Atlantic now. Our reprieve seemingly over. And for all the details, let's turn it to Dr. Steve Lyons.
Well, thanks, Bill. The reprieve is almost over, but we do have something new out there, and that's a new tropical storm, and we'll get to that in just a second. Let me show you this long loop. Here's our tropical storm here, Lisa. And another area of interest or concern is down here in the southwest Caribbean. Those are really our only two trouble spots. Let me give you the latest statistics on Lisa. As of 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 16.4 north, 49.3 west, about 775 miles east of the Leeward Islands, which of course are right in this area here. There's Puerto Rico there. Winds 45 miles per hour, and it's moving to the northwest, which is good news. Northwest at 13 and pressure 1,008. Now, in this particular case, we had a drifting buoy observations that floated into this general area, and they had a buoy observation that basically reported close to 45 miles per hour, so it's immediately upgraded to a tropical storm. Almost all of the tropical storm winds are on the northeast side of the circulation. Now, here's the big thunderstorm mass here. The circulation center is actually off here to the west because of very strong shear aloft, shearing the system off, so we don't expect the system to get any stronger than it is right now. But you can see some big thunderstorm activity and some big plumes of high cloud moving off to the east. And if we back up a little bit, you can see the westerly winds all the way over by Puerto Rico coming all the way across and impinging on the vortex here, tropical storm, and a big sheet of high cloud blowing off. We can see that even better in the infrared imagery that shows our water vapor content. Here's the storm here, and you can see a big upper level low pressure system in here in the dark area and westerly winds impacting it, which is great news because that means it's going to move it to the north into the central Atlantic with very little chance for development the next 24 to 36 hours. Now in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, the Gulf is relatively quiet, not much to talk about there. And in the Caribbean, we've been monitoring an area of disturbed weather down here, and it's always a little bit disturbing when it's in this area this time of year, because when we look at the tropical cyclone origination points between October 1 and 10, they're typically right in that area. And that area does correspond to the secondary peak in frequency. And by the way, we have still about 20% of the hurricane season left in the Atlantic, typically this time of year, and on average about only 10% is left in the Pacific. As we go on further into the rest of the hurricane season and out into the Atlantic basin as well, we can see that out in the Atlantic we don't really have too much to worry about here. Another low pressure center moving off the coast of Africa here, and other than that we're really in pretty good shape. The tropical Pacific is very, very quiet, so let's get back to Bill Keneally on that severe weather across the United States now.
All right, Steve, thanks a lot. Again, let's take a look at what's going on our big picture. It'll come up here momentarily, and we will be able to see the map in the southeast especially. That is where the collision of air masses is occurring. Temperatures are falling very quickly here in the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma. Very tropical area getting drawn northbound with the southwest wind ahead of that front. And right along that front and ahead of it, that is our severe weather potential area. Severe thunderstorm watch goes till, let's see, that's 9 o'clock local time this evening. Show you the radar. Check out these storms in southern Tarrant County. They'll be crossing, I think this is I-45 west, and that's going to be really nasty. Hail and high wind, a very good bet.
Severe storms, including tornadoes, are possible in south-central states. Who should brace for damaging wind, rain, and hail? Next on Weather Center after your local forecast.
A knife from the stove. It was a knife of mythic proportions. And no one could resist the pull of the knife. And then one day came the answer. It takes a big, juicy Outback steak to unlock the true potential of the legendary Outback steak knife.
Just what I was looking for.
Outback Steakhouse. No rules, just right.
Welcome to Storm Watch, which is brought to you by Honda Generators. We've got some storms to talk about in the south central part of the country, some snow to discuss, some winds to mull over, and we also have a tropical storm to talk about during the tropical update. Let's begin with the U.S. We find the satellite picture showing that big mid-latitude cyclone that looks more like an April storm than an October storm. It's the storm that's had a history of tornadoes in Oklahoma, a history of hail, a history of wind damage, and it continues to move toward the east, making history tonight with very heavy rainfall in Arkansas and flash flood warnings in effect for Craighead County, for example, Polk County in Arkansas. And as it wraps around in the northern plains, it's pulling in cold air. Temperatures very chilly for this time of the year. In fact, cold enough for a foot of snow in the Shirley Basin of the southeastern section of Wyoming, where we still have blowing snow advisories. But focusing on the severe weather potential that remains, say along I-30 between Texarkana and Dallas, getting into the Austin area. And as this moves slowly toward the east, we've got that moisture coming up, and then it's getting wrapped around the big low. How much rain has fallen? Here's how much rain has fallen. Storm totals through 7 o'clock Central Time. Joplin, Missouri, in the southwestern part of the Show Me State, about 6 1/3 inches. Columbia, Missouri, in the central part of the Show Me State, over 4 inches. Fayetteville, Arkansas, the home of the University of Arkansas, over 4 inches. And Oklahoma City has had almost 2.5 inches. It's not over. Fayetteville getting wet, Fort Smith, Arkansas getting wet, perhaps the second biggest city in Arkansas, Fort Smith. And this is flowing toward the northeast and has stayed away from Little Rock so far. So far. No doubt that will change by morning commute time as you drive along I-30 or I-40. So this flow of moisture moving toward the northeast at a pretty good clip. You see the darker green, that's where heavy rain is coming down, and heavier rain yet in the oranges and the yellows. And that includes you in the Big D. Dallas-Fort Worth, covered with water tonight, covered with rain. The drive along I-30 around Six Flags Over Texas and Arlington, just a mess tonight. It looks like you in the greater Dallas area going to Fort Worth We'll just have to be very careful. Now, most of the storms are to your south, but none of these where I see no severe weather statements coming out of these. But these are garden variety storms, which, of course, if you're in one and you're experiencing a very strong gust, well, it might as well be bordering on a severe storm. But I-45, you've got to be very careful as this all moves toward the northeast. That drive between Dallas and Texarkana, a messy one tonight. Let's go to Arkansas. We find about the northwestern third of the state wet. The Ozark Plateau, getting into Harrison, down to Fort Smith, and this is a pretty wooded area, pretty hilly, a lot of curved roads. It's a mess to negotiate that tonight. You don't want to be on those roadways. And you see the wet weather. Hot Springs looking good for right now, but again, this will eventually move toward the east. It's just moving pretty slowly. A lot of flooding concerns tonight in these areas where the rains could rack up to 4 inches in western Arkansas. St. Louis, most of the action to your south. You see it, very wet as we get into Cape Girardeau and the western part of Kentucky. There's our flash flood watches. That means flooding potential exists, so try to stay away from those streams, the rivers, the waterways that could be overrunning into the roads where you might be driving. Let's touch upon the tropics right now. First, we'll take a big picture of the Atlantic Basin. We still have some time left. It's not over yet. The peak comes September the 10th. That was the peak. Nothing going on in the Gulf, but we do have a tropical storm. What's the name? Lisa, Tropical Storm Lisa. 45-mile-per-hour winds moving toward the northwest at 12. Experiencing shearing, that means winds, adverse winds, the westerlies, kind of tearing it apart. You need an easterly wind for good development. Now, we do have a lot of deep storminess. We call it convection. It's deep. That's what's created this tropical storm in the first place. But it's expected to eventually move off toward the north. You notice the western part of it not that healthy. It's more the eastern part that's looking healthier. So we're expecting it to be shunted toward the north. But we'll be keeping you updated. There's a look at Tropical Storm Lisa. It has some circulation, and it went almost from nothing, from a wave to a tropical storm. As we take a look at the big picture here, there's a look at Lisa. We're eyeballing the southwest.
Rain and thunderstorms in Texas and the Plains are moving east. We'll show you where wet weather is headed next on Weather Center after your local forecast.
This program was sponsored by Honda Generators. Power when you really need it.
There are some people who prefer to be left in the dark. But if you prefer the light, you need a Honda generator. They're easy to start, efficient, and quiet. But best of all, they're reliable.
Honda. That thing always work. Always.
Honda generators are available at a dealer.